r/AskReddit, what's your creepy Airbnb story? Stayed at one in Rome. The door had 5 deadbolt locks on it. The windows were barred. Found out why. Randomly though that day people would try to open the door and look through the windows. Multiple times we would turn around and see people peeking through cracks between the curtains. We weren't even there a lot. Usually a quick meal or drop stuff off then back out to see the sights. Really nice place though. My sister and I were staying in a cute little detached house in a wealthy part of San Diego. It was right by the beach, but the house was super hippie and relaxed. The man who lived there was out of town, so some of his stuff was out. He was literally making his own kombucha. He had a bathroom attached to his little house that had a door that led to outside. He shared this bathroom with a tenant in another house who didn't have one. Around 4 a.m. she comes home drunk, goes into the bathroom, and starting banging on the door to our room viciously. She's screaming about how he stole her phone yesterday. This man has been out of town for a week. It was scary to wake up to in the middle of the night, but our stay was still great. I was traveling solo in Prague, and I loved my Airbnb apartment. It was the only time I've used them. As I was going into the apartment, this old Czech guy starts yelling at me in Czech. I say sorry, I don't speak Czech, and I go up the stairs. He follows me but heads up another flight. I didn't go into the apartment until he was out of sight. 10 minutes later the doorbell rings, and I look out the peephole and it's the guy. I obviously don't open the door but my heart was beating so hard. He leaves after a few minutes. I talked to the host about it and he came over right away to calm me down and assure me he was great. The guy never showed up again. My fiancé and I were staying at an Airbnb in Helsinki to visit family. When we got there and got settled, we were chatting about things we thought were missing in the apartment. Specifically, I remember saying I wished there was another towel hook in the bathroom. There was only one and obviously 2 towels being used. The next day we went out and were out pretty much all day, and when we got back that night there was another towel hook in the bathroom. A couple years ago, my friend and I, 1819F, were traveling in the southeast USA because we were on spring break. The Airbnb we rented for the night turned out to be a couch in this guy's front room. In the middle of the night, these 2 people come in through the front door, drunk as hell, banging about, cursing, just overall being loud and obnoxious. They were not our Airbnb host, and start talking in front of our bed. I was awake, as was my friend, but we were unsure of what they were doing or what they would do, so we didn't move. They left the house and came back a couple of times, creeping us out the entire time, and we didn't find out until the next morning that our host had been renting one of his guest rooms in the back of the house to them. Also, one of them ended up shitting on top of the toilet seat in the middle of the night. We got a full refund. I got to an Airbnb in bumfuck nowhere somewhere Kansas, at about midnight. The Airbnb was $12 for a night. The property was a quaint little house on some farmland, and I had passed the nearest house about a half a mile down the road. The host was already asleep when I got there so I let myself in and made my way to the couch where I was supposed to sleep. It was eerily quiet and pitch black outside, and I was already nervous so I couldn't get to sleep. The living room was decorated with all kinds of random artifacts and treasures. I was looking around and taking everything in. There were cool rocks and souvenirs, but most curiously there were weird religious objects and books with cultish symbolism. I googled a word I saw on a tapestry, which turned out to be the name of the religion the host followed. The religion revolves around UFOs. The Bible they follow is basically just a categorization of hundreds of types of spaceships. I was a bit on edge after reading that, but after much research, I concluded that it wasn't a murderous death cult, just super weird. I also nosily read through a journal that was just sitting on a coffee table, where the host had written things about her travels. One entry was about how she traveled to Peru and saw a spaceship. She wrote about how she'd never seen one that close before. It was all very strange, but I eventually got to sleep regardless. When I woke up in the morning, the host made me coffee and unprompted, began telling me about her religion, among other conspiracies, like the government being able to control tornadoes. She was very kind and not overbearing, just eager to tell someone her truth. We talked for an hour or so before I got back on the road, and she sent me away with a bunch of stuff to research and an Airbnb magazine. Best Airbnb I've stayed at. Close second would be the gay nudist hostel in Memphis. Not sure if it's creepy, exactly, but it was definitely off-putting. A few years ago, some friends and I rented an Airbnb flat in London for a convention. We'd been corresponding with the owner, who had told us that she would meet us in front of the building to give us the keys and show us around. We messaged her when we got to London, and got a message back confirming the building address and flat number, and telling us the keys were in a lockbox on the front of the building. Weird, but fine. When we got to the building, there was no lockbox, so we messaged her again, Got a message back saying something like oops, wrong flat, on my way, which was weird considering she'd confirmed the address in the same message. We waited 30 minutes and then messaged her again, asking how much longer she'd be. It was around 10 p.m. and raining, and we were all tired. She messaged back about 10 minutes later that she was sending someone else, and to wait inside the building, which we couldn't, because the door was only accessible by key/buzzer. At around 11 p.m., a car pulled up with a guy in it, who yelled out the window keys. One of my friends went over and the guy just handed him a set of keys, with a tag on it that said the flat number we'd been told. He didn't ask our names, or for ID or even identify himself, just handed over the keys and drove off. It was at this point that my other friends suggested we should just bite the bullet and go see if we could get a hotel room, because this was kinda sketchy. But as we were all so tired, we decided to just see if we could get into the flat, and if it was the one in the pictures, we'd stay at least that night. It was super nice, actually, so we stayed. We messaged the owner a few times during our stay, but didn't get a response until the night we were due to leave, when we just got told to leave the keys on the kitchen table and pull the door shut behind us. No reply to any of our questions about anything else. Weird experience. I'm not sure if this applies. We almost got the room but bailed out quickly. So, here's my story. My parents and I were on vacation, and we were searching for a place to stay. Yes, I'm aware it was dumb of us not to make a reservation beforehand, as soon as we got out of the bus. It's normal for people renting rooms there to approach you and ask you if you'd like to rent a room, and soon enough we were approached by this bald guy. That's the only thing I remember about him. The fact that he was bald and shady. I didn't have a good feeling about him, even though I was only a kid. So he comes towards us, and starts talking to my already exhausted dad, who probably wasn't thinking straight at the time, and tells him he has a nice apartment nearby. We agree to go. My dad is carrying our stuff, and walking parallel with the guy, and my mom and I are walking behind them. We enter this neighborhood and we pass a cafe. The waiter, a young guy of I'd presume 16 to 17, comes near my mom and I and quietly tells us not to go with the bald guy, because he's up to no good. At this point I was scared shitless, and my mom was worried, but we decided to check the place out anyway. We arrived at the apartment and there were a lot of stairs. When we finally went into the room, it was all stuffy and clustered and dark, bunker style. I remember the furniture being colorful but unsettling. He asked us what we thought and my mom and I started protesting about it, saying we'd like to check out another place. He started getting weirdly desperate, telling us we wouldn't find a place cheaper, that he had other rooms, we should think about it, etc. His demeanor instantly changed from calm to frustrated and almost angry. My dad finally told him we wouldn't stay there and we booked it out quickly. When we passed the cafe again, the waiter said that the guy had criminal ties. We got another apartment, thankfully, which was pretty nice for a 10-day vacation, but God, the claustrophobia and anxiety that overcame me when we stepped into that room is still real, years later. I can't help but wonder if something happened there. This isn't exactly creepy, but just weirded me out. I was traveling throughout Eastern and Central Europe alone, 18F at the time, and booked a private room through Airbnb. When I got there the owner was not around, so I left my things in the room, locked it, and went exploring for a bit. At around 9:30 p.m. he messaged me asking if I wanted to go out to dinner with him. I had already eaten and hadn't met him yet, and I declined, as I thought it was odd that a man in his mid-40s wanted to go out to dinner with someone he had never met. We chatted a little when I got back to the apartment, and things were fine, but the whole experience was a little off-putting. The next morning he offered me food, and asked if I liked my cereal microwaved. I had no idea people did this. It was very confusing. He then insisted on taking me around the city until I had to catch my bus. As I insisted, he dropped me off early because the whole situation was making me uncomfortable, and I never contacted him again. The owner might have just been overly friendly, and nothing bad ever happened. It was just a weird experience and made me uncomfortable, probably because of how young I was. Stayed in an Airbnb recently that was pretty insane. It was a shared space with several other people in it, but I had my own private room and small living room with a mini fridge and counter. I stayed in room and barely came out since COVID-19 quarantine measures had just started to be enacted. Pretty soon after getting there I started having shortness of breath and vertigo. I started finding drawings in a sketchbook I had that I had no memory of drawing. I didn't speak to anyone for days and started getting really paranoid that someone was going to try to come into my room while I slept. After about a week there I thought I had already died and everything I was seeing was a hallucination to get my mind ready for death. I lived with that and other weird thoughts for another week till I read something on Reddit about carbon monoxide poisoning. Called the gas company and turns out, Sure enough, there was a natural gas leak in my room. Lucky to be alive. Took weeks to get the host and Airbnb to even compensate me for my stay. Can't remember where I read it, but someone found a camera hidden inside a Wi-Fi router in the master bedroom. Ugh. 1. The house with a creepy mannequin propped up at an organ in the backyard. 2. The house where the owner, who was single and lived alone, had 4 things hung up on his fridge. His own Christmas newsletters for the past 4 years. In 2017 he designed a fursuit. I know this because the picture of him in the fursuit made it into the year's Christmas newsletter, which was hanging on his fridge. A last-minute long weekend to Montreal. My first trip to this incredible international city that is affordable and close for people up north in the US. My card was hacked during booking. I arrive and the address doesn't seem to exist. It was just northeast of Mile End, I forget exactly where, but it was right near a freeway that split the road in two. Google Maps showed the Airbnb to be right where the highway was that divided the street. I almost gave up as scammed and returned home. On one last loop I found the address, tucked behind an iron stairwell. I parked, walked up, and the front door was unlocked. I was freaking out because I thought someone was home and didn't know they had been the target of an Airbnb hack and things might get out of control. I sit there for a few and a big guy walks in through the back door. I'm now shitting bricks. He says, "Oh, hi. You must be, username. I'm, whatever. Did you have trouble finding the place?" Turned out to be a super nice guy who was a decades-long, successful professional musician and couldn't have been nicer. When I told him the story and asked about door locks, he replied, "You must be from the States. Montreal is the safest city in North America. I never lock the door and nobody will ever bother you here." That was mostly true. On one hand, I saw a guy blink out a contact lens and everyone stopped to help him find it and not crush it. On the other hand, a group of quite rough people who hang out near McGill gave me shit for not having a Canadian accent, as if my feathers are ruffled by a bunch of addicts. Had a week-long trip to Iceland. Our last night of the trip was just before a 6 a.m. flight, so I booked a cheap spare bedroom through Airbnb, close to the airport in Keflavik. I was honestly considering pulling an all-nighter at the airport instead, and in retrospect I wish I had. I probably would have gotten more sleep. We checked in with the Airbnb owner's 9 to 12-year-old son, I'm terrible at guessing age, who didn't really speak English, even though the owner knew what time we would be arriving. The place was a mess. We really felt like we were invading someone's home. But we had a bed and a bathroom and that's all we needed for one night. The horrible part was overnight. I admit this is partly my fault as I forgot to put the lock on our bedroom door. I happened to wake up overnight to see the owner's son standing at the foot of the bed just staring. I asked him what he was doing and he just turned around and walked away. I woke up my boyfriend who was still asleep, but he didn't really register what I was saying and just went back to sleep. I then locked the door, went back to bed, but didn't get a wink of sleep the rest of the evening. I let the owner know what happened after we got home, but he didn't really do anything or offer any explanation. 010 would not recommend at all. I stayed in one that used to be a love hotel in Ikebukuro, Tokyo last year. Found out a few months later there was a guy going around murdering people in their hotels in that area.